Uh, okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to HCI-space, a podcast where we explore the world of human-computer interactions through conversation with the people designing the future of how we live, learn, and connect with technology. I'm your host, Aditya Singh, and this week we're joined by Professor Safina Ali, who's an associate professor at NYU specializing in HCI. Hi, Professor Ali, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So before we dive into your recent work, I like to start each episode with the same question. It helps us
Mhm.
understand not just what you work on, but why. So with that in mind, like how did you get into HCI? Was there a moment that really pulled you in?
Yeah, so I actually got into this from a game design angle. So I did, when I was an undergrad student, I was studying design and I looked at like different types of design, like game design, graphic design, animation, movies, ATI, all these different angles. And I was very interested in like making games, making playful interactions for people, and studying how people looked at them. But then I didn't know this entire field of ATI existed that like kind of looks at this kind of work. And I started to make games, specifically games for learning. And it was a really fun time seeing how kids actually played these games and what they were learning and then studying that. So then I started to look at like fields that do that, not just like looking at the making of things, but also the human side of things. And then I found this entire field of HCI that was looking at human psychology, at computer science, and at design, and all these fields coming together. I found it really interesting. So I pursued a master's in the field, and that's how I like formally got into the field.
That's very cool. And a lot of people might not even know what HCI is. So do you think you can explain it in a way that would make sense to a high schooler?
Yeah, so HCI stands for Human Computer Interaction. It is a, I think, 40-year-old field now. Oftentimes people think it's like a subfield of computer science, but I think of it the other way around. I think computer science is a subfield of human computer interaction. And it's a study of how people interact with computers around them. And the definition has changed over time. Like earlier, we used to call this man machine interaction, then we called it human machine interaction, then we called it human computer interaction. Now we say, there's subfields around it, like human robot interaction, human AI interaction, like child computer interaction. It's all these different subfields. But basically, it's like studying how people interact with technology.
Nice, it's a very nice explanation. And so yeah, now diving into your research, I think one of your papers you were talking about how kids in your workshops could use AI to generate stories, image take normal people decades or years to learn, right? And so, what do you think this means for the future careers of like artists, writers, and musicians?
Mhm. Yeah, so just to put context to that work, we were looking at AI as a means of creative expression. And the work was also focusing on AI literacy. So here we had high schoolers who were learning about how AI tools work, what their limitations are, what their ethical implications are, the social implications are, and so on. I think human creativity is really, really vital. I also don't think human creativity is going anywhere. It's very central to how we interact with each other, like how we exist over here. Like we've always made art, whatever material we had. Like we had stones, we made art. We had paints, we made art. We had code, we made art. And now we have AI, we make art. So we're going to keep doing all of those things. We just used AI as another medium of creative expression, especially around identities. And we did an interesting activity where students could, they had their these dreams that they had about themselves, about the world around them, and then they use AI to like express them. And that's true. Like, it takes them like a lot lesser time than if they were using like analog art making things. Like some students also chose to draw, some chose to paint, and it of course like took them a longer time. And some of them decided to prompt machines and work back and forth. Some even went from drawing to using AI and then went back to their drawing of that. And yeah, it was a means for them to see how these AI tools work for creative expression. I think what that means for future creativity is like there's just another tool that we have in our box that we can use, but there are also a lot of irresponsible uses of this tool. And, sometimes it also hurts artists. Like a lot of artists' work has been used to train these tools as well. So it's important for young learners, especially like young art learners, to know that these things exist, these things happen, and then also taking informed decisions around where you want to use it in your creative process. So we had a lot of students in the same workshop who would express that, oh, AI kind of like took over, right? Like it had its own creative ideas, but those were different from my ideas, and I don't like that. So also, deciding when in your creative process do you want to bring in AI, if you want to bring it in at all. I think we're always going to be creative. We're just going to have new tools to be creative, and we have to make decisions around when and where and if we want to use them.
I see. I think, yeah, your point on like how it's just another medium to express artwork is like it kind of shifts my perspective too, because
Mhm.
like your point on how like, back in the Stone Age where we used stones to create art, and like now we're using AI to do the same. It's a very good point. And like, yeah, it kind of shifts my perspective too. But yeah, also coming to your prompt engineering point,
Yeah.
in your research, students created an average of 12 images each, constantly tweaking and prompting until they got what they wanted. So do you see
Yeah.
this process of trial and error prompting as kind of like a new literacy, like learning to write or code? And like, should schools start teaching prompt engineering as skills?
Yeah, so I think prompt engineering is important. Like writing good prompts is actually really hard. Like it turns out it's kind of tricky to teach machines how to do different tasks. So there are two ways to think about it. Like, yes, I think it's important to learn how to prompt machines better. But, there's all this research done around people who are able to use AI tools the best are actually not AI experts or like prompting experts. They are domain experts. So, like if you're using it for architecture, let's say, like the person who can use it the best is someone who has a lot of architecture expertise. Same with like visual art, right? Like the person who's able to use it the best is someone who already knows a lot about visual art techniques, because then you know how exactly to guide your AI tools to that. So I think domain expertise is really important. Like people who have domain expertise, they can use AI the best to do a task. So I think it's still important for schools, colleges to develop this domain expertise in whatever domain you're working in. In this case, it would be art, right? And then, yeah, that skill of like going back and forth with a machine, like tweaking your prompts, I think that's really important. But I also see in like the field of AI, like going forward, prompting actually is a very limited way of interacting with something. Like, as you said, as his words, I think we as creators of technology also think oftentimes about cool ways of interacting with technology that go beyond just language. So, like interacting with gestures, interacting with drawings, doing like multimodal interaction, right? So, like having speech and words and gestures and drawings, like all that combined together. So, I do see that, while prompting right now might seem like a really important skill, I think going forward, we might have a lot of other ways of interacting with machines also.
I see. So yeah, just so do you think it's more on the basis of being an expert in the specific domain where it'd be more useful to like learn how to prompt versus like just knowing how to generally prompt?
I think both. Like I think knowing how to prompt also has its like benefits. Just think of it as like people who've been using like Google search for so long. Like we know exactly what to type in the search bar to
Yeah.
get to like ideal results, right? Like sometimes you want like a blog, sometimes you want like a Reddit post to answer this, and you know exactly what keywords to put in where. But so yeah, I think general prompting techniques are important to learn. So like how to give specific instructions, but I also think domain expertise is important. So like if I'm trying to prompt for creating photographs, for example, like having a photography expertise like really helps in like having the right prompts.
I see. Okay. And yeah, just like a lot of your work revolves around just going to like middle schoolers and teaching them about AI. So based on that, I was curious to know, like, do you think we should bring AI, generative AI to assist middle schoolers or just in school in general, or do you think we shouldn't? Or if you do, then when do you think is the best time for these kids to start learning?
Mhm. I think they should learn about AI. So there are two questions in there, right? Like, should they know about AI, and then should they be using AI in their like classrooms, right? So two very different questions. I think knowing about AI, yes, I think they should know as soon as possible, because AI tools exist in a lot of tools that they're already using. Like a lot of kids use, like YouTube Kids has a learning algorithm in there, right? Like mobile phones, social media, they use all of these tools. So it's important for them to know about how they work, how they collect their data, how they train on their data, how it can be used, how it can be misused, and like the positives and negatives, all of that. So I think like learning about how AI works and how it impacts us, that's very important. It is important for middle schoolers also. I think embedding AI tools in the classroom, that I would say, like, I don't think it's like, oh, we absolutely need to do that. I think we need to be very critical about what tools actually enter classrooms. And I think, teachers should be involved in making these decisions, parents should be involved in making these decisions, and like policymakers should be involved. Like right now, it's very much like a top down, like, it's oftentimes like tech companies deciding what tools enter classrooms, but it should be the other way around. Like, I think we should think about what truly benefits their learning and then what like impedes their learning, right? Because sometimes if you just um, like give a load of the tasks to the machines to do and not think critically about them, let's say to do your homework, right? Like if you're writing all of your essays using ChatGPT, yeah, then you're like never going to learn how to write well. So I think how and when these tools should be integrated, that should be left to the learning experts. And I don't think technologists should solely decide when tools should enter classrooms. And I also think, like, students now, middle schoolers, high schoolers especially, uh, they're so brilliant, and they already have so many like opinions about what impacts their learning in what way. So I think their opinions should also be considered in making decisions around what tools enter classrooms.
I see. Yeah, that's a good answer. And also, on that point, for critical thinking and resilience, actually, I remember I had an interview with the professor from Georgia Tech, and she said like a very similar thing. She had I feel like she had more of like a pessimistic view of AI in the future. Like
Mhm.
she said, there might be medical or robotics or engineering advancements, but AI also impedes critical thinking and resilience in a bunch of students. So based on that, I was curious to know, like, do you think with the rise of AI, is there more of like an optimistic future or a pessimistic future in like the critical thinking skills and resilience of students?
I think in the short term, I have some pessimism around, yes, like I think, it's easy to offload a task and that makes us a little bit lazier, because, we like give up tasks we don't want to do and then we never develop that domain expertise. So it's easy for domain experts to go like, this is making my work more efficient and like my life more efficient. But for someone who hasn't yet developed that domain expertise, they just keep offloading tasks and then don't develop that critical thinking, that creative thinking. So I do worry about that. But I think in the long term, like we underestimate people's hunger to learn, especially young people's. Like people want to learn and people want to be good at stuff themselves, because you also won't always have AI tools. And even if you do, when you know about how to do things by yourself, you'll be able to use AI tools better. I think though a productive solution is not to run away from AI tools completely, because it's gonna be there, right? Like it's in our environments, and there are a lot of positive use cases. But I think the more that people are realizing how their own learning works, so it's called like metacognition, right? Like thinking about your own learning, the more and more we have students do that, the more and more they are responsible about when and how to use these tools. So I think I have like a mixed view. Like long term, I have a pretty optimistic view. But I do think that a lot of us need to think critically about responsibly using these tools also. I don't think there should be a blind use of like, oh, AI should be in everything. I don't think so. I think we do need to think critically about where to use it. I don't think banning of tools
Mm.
is like very productive either, because there are clear benefits and we don't necessarily want to like limit students from that.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree because I feel like I actually agree a lot with your point on like how short there's going to be pessimism in like the short future, because especially with the rise of AI right now, I know a lot of my peers that they use it for like their homework assignments, and like
Mhm.
they don't like they'll procrastinate and then they'll just use ChatGPT to like write their answers for their homework. But in the long term, when they're pursuing their masters or something, this is not something they can do. And then I feel like from there they're going to start kind of going back and then actually have curiosity to learn in order to be successful in their field, not just overly rely on ChatGPT. So yeah, I actually really agree with that point. But yeah, and also in one of your other studies that you said students used AI to imagine future versions of themselves, sometimes
Mhm.
in roles where they couldn't often see people who look like them. Do you think AI can actually help youth rewrite cultural stereotypes about race, gender, and identity? Or is it more likely that AI will just reinforce and perpetuate the same old stereotype patterns?
Yeah, so I think right now where we're at, it's reinforcing a lot of stereotypes and patterns. There's a lot of algorithmic bias, and young people realize that. But I think what you actually suggested is like brilliant. It also brings opportunities to rewrite that, right? Like rewrite all of these biases that exist, and we see some of that happening. Like there's a group that I worked with. It's a young group of like young people from Myanmar, and there's this like local art form that they're like trying to preserve, and they made some like local AI models of that to bring this art form to different audiences, like to make it more visible and also like preserve it in data. So yeah, I think oftentimes it does come down to like figuring out these uses. And I also think, our young people are quite critical, they are quite responsible. They do find these like good ways of using technology, but as of where we are right now, there is a lot of bias that exists because it's trained on historic data. And another thing with AI is it treats like all data as data, but that's not how society works. Like society moves on, right? And we like our culture keeps changing all the time. And if you treat a machine as like something that's trained on all of data as equal, then it's not moving on from the past. And it's only like multiplying all of the problematic things that we have in our data. And data is very problematic, right? Like we have all of these different kinds of biases that I'm sure you've seen, even in like tools as like innocent seeming as like Google Translate has gender biases, racial biases in there. And yeah, things like that come out in AI today. But yeah, great opportunity to rewrite the future.
Yeah, I see. So do you think like maybe in the future after like, because right now, as you said, like data is being reused from like old cultural stereotypes. Maybe in the future, like after, I don't know, like 20 years, like this might be like completely different. Like the data we're training AI on might shift to like another, like a more positive attribute that fits people more.
Like not automatically. I think we need to make significant efforts towards moving it to that. Because the things that worry me right now is like at least how AI is structured right now, right? Is that like corporates have a lot of control over it, like people in technology have a lot of control over it. And everyone has their own interests and they can bend data towards their interest.
I see.
So I think automatically things don't move towards a utopia, so to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, there can be like I think utopian ends to this. There can be dystopian ends to it. More likely, um, things are often used to harm. Like look at social media for example. Like there's a ton of positive use cases, and like we're all so well connected. Like we can share information, we can do so many awesome things. But social media is also used for very very harmful things. And I think there need to be conscious efforts from a lot of us, right? So, like conscious efforts from policymakers, conscious efforts from the government, from educators, from designers of technology themselves, and from citizens as a whole to move technology to that point, as with any other thing.
Right, I totally agree.
Mhm.
But yeah, also coming back to like the more general, just like, do you find anything like unexpected or like cool in your research, like when you were working with these students?
Mm. I think the thing that I've been finding that's like really cool is doing this work over the past like 6, 7, whatever years. Every year, students know so much more about AI than they did the previous year. And I've never seen a field like so rapidly change with like what young people know about it. I think what's also interesting is I think young people spend a lot of their time using technology today, for better for worse. This is the world that they're growing up in, right? So I think they're also great sources of knowledge. Like I think they know a lot of things about, say, the algorithm, right? That experts at this point might not know. So there's also this like two-way exchange of knowledge that is happening. Like oftentimes, it would be top down, but here, like this is two-way of, oh, you're also learning about how AI impacts society through the young people and them sharing their knowledge. So that's been like fun to see. Another interesting thing I've often seen is like people mimicking technology, especially like social technology. So like let's say your AI talks a certain way, like people start to talk that way, or like your I don't know, chat GPT using a certain lingo, like your Instagram using a certain kind of language or words. Like people start to adopt those words within them. So there's this like entire new like tech pop culture that emerges, and I think that's very interesting, especially with young people. And then I also think like young people have their own like cultural nuances, so like language nuances, like fashion nuances, a lot of different things, right? And then they often like use technology to exchange it. So that's also very interesting to see, is like how does that exchange of culture happens through tech tools, including like AI tools.
I see. So wait, so I just want to clarify this. So it's true that like ChatGPT lingo is being like used as like it's being like taken from ChatGPT and it's actually being incorporated in like daily people's like lives. That's actually true? Oh
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So people, and that's not unique of ChatGPT. Like this has always happened. Like the way that technology talks, people start to mimic how we talk, like how we talk often like mimics how, and that's very very normal if you think about it, because we
Mhm.
are constantly mimicking people around us. Like if you think about how you talk, usually that's going to be an average of like the people you interact with the most. Like let's say you have like five people you speak to every day, you're basically going to be an average of those five people.
Mhm.
And now this is like a new person that's like emerged around you, and you start to copy that style. And also this is especially true of young people. Like older people sometimes have set ways of talking and they're like less flexible, but with younger
Mhm.
people they emulate very quickly. And social emulation is, it's not a bad thing. Like it's a way of survival. Like that's how we learn to sort of fit in. So we automatically try to keep emulating and copying those around us. So technology is no limit to that.
I see. Yeah, I just think it's kind of funny because right now people I know a lot of friends that, use ChatGPT to write their essays and then they'll paraphrase it kind of, but down the line, I feel like if this continues to be a trend, then eventually like kids will have like so much like overlap in ChatGPT lingo where like an
Yeah.
essay they genuinely write by themselves will be flagged as AI.
Yeah, yeah, and that's already happening actually. So the AI, like the flaggers or those tools that detect AI or not, those are actually very flawed. So a lot of the times, like I've seen students write themselves, and they put it into the like AI detectors, and it does rate it as like a high percentage AI. And this is like known to happen a lot. It also happens especially with like academic writing, with technical writing, because there are such like fixed forms of writing it. So AI would often detect it as AI. So it's important to know that those AI detectors are actually not accurate.
I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, interesting. But yeah, it's coming more general. Like, what are some ways we can build trust with people in technology? Because obviously there are a lot of like skeptical, cynical
Yeah.
people of AI.
Um, I don't think we need to. Like, I think antitrust should exist.
I see.
Like there should always be people like critical of AI, any technology that impacts
Mhm.
society. I don't think it's important to necessarily always build trust. But I will say, I think what we need to do is like have an informed critique. Like sometimes I hear critiques that might not be very founded. Like, they might be worrying about things that are not really realistic in at least our near future. And actually not worrying about the actual harms that AI does have. So I think like how I think about it is like an informed critique is important, but critique is important. Critique of anything must exist, because
Mhm.
otherwise you're essentially like forcing people to accept a thing around them,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, that's actually a very unique answer. I like it. I actually really agree with that. It's just to like be cynical of kind of like everything, right? Because
Mhm.
it might not work out the same way as it would with different people. But yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, yeah, what part of the future of HCI excites you the most and what worries you the most?
Um, okay, let's see. So a lot of things that excite me. Like I'm very excited about creativity as a research area. Like I think about how technological tools can increase access to creating. So both who can create and what can be created. So that's an exciting field. And I also look at it from like a not just like an end point of, oh, I made this cool art, but also like the process of creativity, right? So how can technology actually help you through the entire process? And I hope that like more people work in the process area than the product area, because we really like to make art, right? Like we as people, we really like to talk to each other, to like draw, to write. All of these things are things that we really enjoy. So instead of like having that be taken over, like I am thinking about how do we make technology that makes that process more enjoyable, more accessible, more interesting. So that's one thing that excites me. I'm also very excited to see like how young people conceptualize and rebuild technology. So what usually happens is that a generation that like grows up with something new being introduced, it's a very chaotic time, right? As you might have noticed for you, right? Like you're just like, oh, this is like suddenly this new thing that now I'm having to grow up with, to grapple with, and it's all around me, and everyone has opinions about it. But then that generation, like when they come into the workforce, they reshape it. And like with my generation, this happened with the internet, right? Like we grew up with a very chaotic like World Wide Web, and then grew up to shape it in interesting ways. And so that I'm also interested to see like where our world of technology and social connection actually grows. The one thing that like worries me, in because I do so much creativity related work, is the unification of styles, right? So the thing with AI is like one style emerges, or like there becomes like one way of talking. Like all of us are going to like at some point centrally converge somewhere, because AI is like, think of it in very simple terms, and like averages out all of these things and gives you the most probabilistic answer, right? So then the most probabilistic one will become the only one. But we don't all want to like have one way of talking, one way of drawing, one way of doing things. Ideally we really enjoy having these unique ways of doing things, and then find that interesting, and like our culture keeps like changing and evolving. So what worries me is like that we'll all centrally come to this like one way of doing things, if we don't act now. So that's the thing that worries me about like data in general. And that one way, I mean, at worst, it's also harmful, right? Because it has all these stereotypes, these biases. But even at best, like let's say we make our data like really good, really great, really progressive, all of that, it's still like gonna be boring. So yeah, I'm scared of boring.
I see. Yeah, no, like I think the way you said like how where one generation builds like the internet and then like the youth that kind of grew up with the internet drives it and actually like revolutionize it, that honestly like kind of inspires me because like AI was just launched, it's just like in its new like kind of starting phase, and I'm growing up with it, so like I'm like really excited to see what I and like my peers can do with it, and to the fact that there's actually a lot of room for innovation here. But yeah, that excites me as well. But yeah, yeah, if you could give one piece of advice to young people interested in technology that impacts humans broadly, what would it be?
I think technology today is a lot broader than what it was back in the day. Like, now technology is relevant to so many disciplines, like it's relevant to creatives, it's relevant to like ethicists, to philosophers. So like do not be afraid of technology, and like don't think of, oh, I'm not a tech person. Like I think it's important for everyone to dabble in it, to be very critical of it as well, and like voice out your opinions. Like young people really matter. Like young people are very smart, and they have these nuanced opinions about tools, about technology. So voice it out, because different perspectives are important here. I also think that like the more and more that time goes on, like our future careers are a lot more integrated in disciplines. So like earlier we used to have these like siloed disciplines, right? Like a physics major does physics and like an AI major does AI, or like a computer science person does computer science. But like the more and more we go forward, like disciplines emerge that are at intersections of fields. And I think that's where like the most interesting work lies, is when you're able to take one discipline, take another discipline, combine them in interesting ways, and like make things that like benefit people around you, that benefit you, that benefit your communities. So yeah, think in those terms also. And I also think like learning is also so rapidly evolving. Like what we need to know is also changing so much that there are no rules right now. Like all the paths that were pretty formed for when we were growing up, like those paths are changing so rapidly also. So come up with your own paths, right? There's so many professions that exist today that didn't exist 10 years ago, and there'll be so many new ones that come up in the next 10 years. So yeah, always keep those possibilities open as well. And then the other thing that I see with young people that I work with, maybe this, I mean, correct me if this is like wrong, is there's a lot of anxiety around AI, and like, what does this mean for my future? Like, are there going to be jobs, like things like that? And I think, while I'm empathetic to the anxiety that exists right now, I think really, like, engage with these emerging tools, with conversations around it, like what the adults are saying, what people younger than you are saying, and like be less, like, scared of things, but more go into it with like a curiosity mindset, and we'll be fine.
No, I agree with that entirely because um with the internet it was kind of like almost the same thing because like yes there are some jobs that the internet might have taken, but that's just the same thing with AI. It's just like we need to be able to adapt to it and
Yeah.
then see it as a like a lens of curiosity. I actually really like that answer. But yeah, anyway, just to like wrap this up, thank you so much for being on my podcast. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Any final words?
No, that's everything. Thank you so much for having me. Like, I think one final thing that I want to leave with is, oh, what was I saying? Oh, it slipped my mind. I'll email you. I was going to say something I forgot about. But no, thank you so much. You're really good at interviewing, and thank you for having me on here as well.
Thank you.